by aping God, he wages war as a means of securing peace. So this idea of peace as the ultimate objective is, for Augustine, that's always the case. Now, how do you define peace? Okay, Augustine actually talks about a just peace versus an unjust peace. Okay, and so now we have just war, and just peace. But that, and everybody desires peace. And he gives some really interesting examples. You know, even robbers band together, and they want to protect each other. You know, savage animals sometimes display signs within their own pride or den or group of wanting peace, and man is the same way. But on earth, even though man naturally desires peace, he will never, never, never attain it. And that includes in Rome itself. Even though Augustine saw Rome as a Christian empire, it is impossible to obtain ultimate peace because we are fallen. And he even, it's really interesting, he goes from the state all the way down to the internal man, the flesh and the spirit waging together, and this idea that on earth we will never attain that peace that we're seeking for. But we should seek for it. Okay. He certainly doesn't throw up his hands and say, so what difference does it make? You know, pie in the sky, sweet by and by. Or actually not pie in the sky, but sweet by and by at least.
Hey Jim, the peace that man is seeking, possibly through licit or illicit military action, that doesn't have any godly or holy connotations. It's more an equilibrium. I want mine, I want my safety, it might be at your price, but I don't want you to be in a position to counterattack me. That's the sort of peace we're talking about? Or are they actually longing here for the peace of God? Which one are you saying?
Oh, okay. So
an equilibrium or a real peace?
I think he might say that normally it's an equilibrium, but that if you're in a state that is Christian, there is a longing among those Christians within the state and by the state itself, if the sovereign's a Christian, that's greater. That by virtue of a state being a Christian state, it is that state therefore desiring a Christian form of peace, though not perfect, it is therefore just and fair and right for soldiers to serve and in fact their duty to serve. So you see how it steps up by virtue of the state being Christian, the state or the state and the sovereign being Christian. Yeah, that's a good question.
Could peace be defined also as just the absence of controversy or
the absence of war?
Well, not just war, but safety. You know, the absence of unsafe elements attacking.
Right.
Whether it's that band of criminals or pirates or community.
Right. You're talking about in Augustine or just in...
No, yes, in regards to what you're speaking about. Right. The peace that everybody is seeking, even just on a secular level, is that what it is?
As a result of our fallen state.
I think that it's a little more because it includes a peace with God. And it's sort of this concept of the New Jerusalem. He thinks, Augustine often, I believe, thought and talks about Rome as kind of helping to usher in the New Jerusalem, but not being able to actually do it because it's still just a secular state. Well, a Christian state, but it's not. It's a city of man. It always will be. So that, yes, I think that the beating of the swords into plowshares, Augustine says that will never happen on earth. And I think that's what you're kind of talking about, the absence of conflict or strife.
Right.
But he also has a positive view of peace to include on the individual level all the way up to the eschatological level,
okay.
A peace with God. The city of God, the city of man coming together into one at the end of time. Okay. So we've hit the first two, and how do we get there? Great. All right, role of the state. And if I'm talking too fast or moving too fast, somebody just tell me to slow down, because sometimes I start talking really, really fast.
I'm a slow thinker, so that's fine.
And I'm like, oh wow, I have an outline that's 9 pages, and I'm on page 3.
Could I
more than half
halfway
of
down
this
that
page.
lust for domination? Was he the first to coin that phrase and to write about it? I mean, he wasn't the first to think it, but
Right. I think he was.
Okay.
He's the first. In the studies I've done, I've never heard, he's associated with that phrase, and he uses it a lot. I've never heard of another church father or even a pagan philosopher using that particular phrase.
Was it one of Ambrose's concepts?
No, I don't think so, because Ambrose's view of man wasn't the same as Augustine's. In fact, Ambrose believed that in the end, everybody would be saved. That there was really a sense of a more positive view of, a more positive anthropological view
Than Augustine.
than Augustine, yes.
That's not hard.
Right, Augustine's he was quite somber. So yeah, I don't think so. I don't. Ambrose's theology. Interestingly enough, I don't think Augustine was terribly influenced by Ambrose's theology. And I'm sure that there are people who disagree with me saying that, and I could be wrong. I haven't seen it, but I'm no scholar on Augustine either. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. The role of the state. We've pretty much hit this as well, but obviously, while just war is possible, a perfect just state is not possible. However, as we mentioned, if the state is Christian and it has a Christian sovereign, then as much as possible on this earth, we can have a just state, but it's not a perfect just state. And that state, by virtue of being Christian and by virtue of therefore thinking Christian thoughts, will wage just wars. Okay. Yeah, I know. But that's assuming, again, that's assuming that they're maintaining the Christian doctrine. It's not just by virtue of them being Christian, they're given a rubber stamp to go out and do great and horrible things, but that they will follow the precepts of Christ and follow the precepts of Scripture, and therefore they will be fighting a just war. The first week that we were here, I think one of the questions I asked, and we got, I think, just different answers from different people, was, can two sides in a war both be waging a just war at the same time? And I'm not talking about use in bello, justice within war, but use ad bellum, the decision to go to war, justice of war. Can two sides that are fighting be waging a just war at the same time?
No. In their own mind, they can. I mean,
That is true.
Based on their beliefs, they can. If they apply this to what they believe, they both can. But ultimately, no.
Right. I think it would be very hard. I'm hard pressed to find an example. I'd need to think more about it. But Augustine says no, it is impossible. Because two Christian states would never fight. Therefore, you would have a Christian state and a barbarian or pagan, or and therefore.
And barbarians are incapable of launching a just war.
According to Augustine, yes,
Okay.
yes.
But that's sort of ipso facto because they're barbarians.
Right. Well, yeah, and it was the Vandals. The Vandals. Remember, the Vandals tore down the walls of Hippo. They're Vandals. I mean, they were pretty bad. Vandalism is still a term, and it's not
What
possible.
about World War One? All the
even-
major nations of World War One in Europe were Christian,
Right.
In
Right.
name.
and
So okay. So what does that mean?
well, the Austrians were defending themselves against the Serbs,
Right.
who were practicing foreign terrorism,
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
and I mean,
So what you
Yeah.
had is either two sides fighting a just war, or you had two Christian states where one was acting outside the bounds of Scripture. You had to have one. I mean, and that's a good question.
Well, yeah, two Christian states where both were.
Or both were, right? Absolutely.
Is it French and Indian War?
Which I know nothing about. I could fake my way through this, but I won't try.
Basically, the French
Well,
really
I'm
wanted, the
horrified.
French wanted territory, and so they allied themselves with the Indians against,
Right.
Against the British.
So they wanted, but you said they wanted more territory. So they may be Christian,
they
but
wanted
is
to
that
expand, well,
against-
they were already up in the Canadian provinces, so they wanted to come down.
Right.
And, as a result, the Indians were the ones who knew the sneaky ways to get in, so.
And this raises again the issue of
Who
the
was,
rubber stamp.
who was right and who was wrong
Yeah,
in
but
that
that was an
instance.
extension of wars that were in Europe at the same time. We just brought European wars to this point.
Think about it too.
Yes.
When you're asking these questions, this is good, but think about whether or not it's not just that it's a Christian state, but that they are applying each and every one of those criteria for the just war doctrine. Now, if both, I don't see how both sides can both be applying all of the doctrine. I mean, all of the criteria of the doctrine. I don't. But again, I haven't spent a long time meditating on that. But these are good questions. These are very good questions because again, it raises the issue of what constitutes a just war, and does being a Christian state automatically mean your war is just?
What about the 100 Years' War? Between England and France.
It's religious war.
Okay. I mean, again, these are good examples. These are good stuff to think about. It's stuff, yeah.
Well, you
And
get
sometimes-
into, I'm more Christian than you
Right,
are
I was about to
kind
say,
of
it's like
thing.
George Orwell, you know, all of us are equal, but some are more equal than others. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
All of us are Christians, but some are more just than others. You know?
I'm more just than you are
Right, that's
just.
right, my just war's juster. So.